Hi, everybody. We are going to get started on our final assignment for the quarter, and this will actually be our final assessment as well. So this is going to be our sixth and final assessment for the quarter that you're going to be doing this week. It's going to be a little bit lighter, a little bit different than a normal assessment would be for us, but I gave you a sort of big project last week, so I wanted to make it a little bit simpler this week. So what you're going to be doing, this assignment is focused on looking at what happened to Europe to transition out of the feudal system. So we know we've been talking about things like the Crusades and the Mongols and the Black Death that all helped contribute to the end of the feudal system. But how did that actual end happen? That's what we're going to be looking at today. And specifically, the end of the feudal system was really down to a couple of really strong monarchs, that would be kings or queens, that came into Europe in the 1400s. And these kings and queens took the feudal system, where a lot of the power resided in the nobles, and then if you also remember, a lot of the power also resided in the church, spread out in these little fiefs, these little tiny pieces of land all around the country. And instead, these monarchs consolidated power. That means they took all the power for themselves. So they found ways to take away power from the nobles, and a lot of times also power from the church, and to center that power on themselves. And the result was they created a lot more unified countries and nations in Europe. So we went from these little tiny fiefs being how most people's lives were defined. You weren't from France, you were from Burgundy, or you weren't from England, you were specifically from Northumbria, specific piece of land in England, to being these unified nations, these unified countries, where people started to identify and really believe in France. And that's actually how we transitioned from having these little wars between all of those little tiny fiefs to having these giant wars between entire countries, between France and Germany and France and England and things like that. So that's what you're going to be looking at in this assignment. You're going to be looking at 4 of those monarchs, probably the most important 4 for ending the feudal system in Europe, particularly Western Europe. And you're going to read about those 4 monarchs, and the readings for each of those are linked in the directions. So if you read the directions below this video, in blue, it should say Readings Moving into the Modern Era. If you click on that link, it'll open a Google Doc for you that will have pictures of the 4 different monarchs that you're going to be reading about. And if you click on each picture, that will then link you to the actual reading on that monarch. So instead of giving you 4 different links, I gave you one, and that one link is linked to the other 4 readings. Once you open the reading up, read it about that monarch and fill out the capture sheet. The capture sheet is linked at the very bottom of the directions here. So this is important because I got questions about this last week. The way that it works on my MCPS when we're using Google Docs to finish our assignments, at the very bottom of the directions, there'll be a little gray button that says load, whatever the name of the assignment is, in a new window. And if you click on that button, it will open a Google Doc in a new tab, and that's what you actually need to fill out and submit to me as your assignment. So click that button, it'll open up the capture sheet. The capture sheet has 4 boxes, one for each of those sets of monarchs, and each box has the time period that the monarch ruled in, the nation that they ruled. Those can just be answered in 1 or 2 words. Obviously, it doesn't have to be complete sentences or even bullet points. And then it'll have 3 questions. How did the monarch come to power? What did the monarch do to reduce the power of nobles in his or her nation? And then 2 other interesting facts. For each of those 3 questions, you do not, I'll repeat, you do not need to use complete sentences. But you do need detailed bullet points from the texts. So I don't want just like 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 word bullet points. I want detailed bullet points. And it's in the capture sheet already, and it's in the directions multiple times, but you need at least 2 bullet points for each of those questions. You can have more than that. In fact, if you want full credit for this assessment, because it is an assessment grade, so I'm expecting a pretty decent amount of work from you guys, then you might want to have more than 2 bullet points, but you need at least 2. Once you get done with those 4 boxes, you've done the reading for each of those 4 sets of monarchs and filled out the capture sheets, there is a critical thinking question at the bottom. Do not forget the critical thinking question. It is 4 points out of the 20 points on this assignment. So make sure you do that critical thinking question as well. That critical thinking question, you do need to use complete sentences, and there do need to be 4 complete sentences at least. So it should be like a paragraph. There are some questions to help guide your thinking in answering that critical thinking question, but you do not need to use those. The question itself is, how did European monarchs contribute to the end of the feudal period and the beginning of a strong, unified nation states in Europe? Again, you can answer that on your own with 4 complete sentences, or you can use the guiding questions below to help you make those 4 sentences. But you do not have to answer the guiding questions. They're just there to help you if you're sort of struggling to come up with what your 4 sentences should be. And once you've got that done, you can go ahead and submit it, and that'll be that for the end of the quarter. If you've got any questions, as always, make sure to email me, or as per the schedule that's posted on my MCPS Classroom, and that you should have gotten in a lot of different forums from a lot of different people, then you can check into Zoom office hours and get some individual help from me if you're having trouble. And I would say, especially if you're having trouble with that critical thinking question, it might be a good idea to drop into office hours rather than just trying to send me an email. All right, so good luck on that final assignment. Let me know if you've got any questions, and have a great week.